checking technology. Yes, we're live. Yay. Happy Tuesday, y'all. Happy Tuesday. I'm so excited for today's live stream. I've got a really great dear friend of mine, a client of mine, and also someone who is just going to, I think, knock your socks off today, Craig Stanland. He has done an incredible thing with his life that I'm very excited to share with y'all because he's taken his life from what I think many of us would consider rock bottom. I think he would share that with you as rock bottom and really turned his life around and not only created success, but created success his way from a place of integrity where he's really rebuilt and started his life over and turned that into his mission and mission. And I'm very excited to have him here. I'm just excited to share this with y'all. So now that I've got the yips out from trying to get technology, let me turn you over to Craig. Craig, do you want to introduce yourself and say hi while I just play on the back end to make sure we're working?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Craig Stanland. I am a speaker, an author, a coach, and a reinvention architect. And I'm guessing 3 out of the 4 of those, you're probably like, all right, I got that. But what the heck is a reinvention architect? I help people whose lives have fallen apart. I help them rebuild and reinvent their lives. And not only people whose lives have fallen apart, but people who just are feeling stuck and want to start over and don't know how to begin. And as Kim had alluded to, I hit rock bottom and I had to start over from scratch and completely reinvent my life. The life that I knew was completely, I burnt it to the ground. And I had literally nothing and I had to start over. And I'm sure we're going to jump into how that all happened. But that's my intro. I hope everybody is having an awesome day, night, whenever you're watching this.
I thank you. And we've got the tech going. So thank you. We're good, y'all. As everyone's watching, let us know if you have comments, reflections, chime them in. I don't know how easily I'm going to see them. So if I'm a little slow to respond, I'm not ignoring you. But what I want to dive into, because you've written a book about this, you're getting ready to self-publish this. I think you have a really unique story. And you're also someone who because I work with you, I know the behind the scenes. I know you are walking your talk. I know you're someone who is legitimately creating success. And I say that because in the online space, it's one thing. I think there's just a lot of stories out there. And it's another thing when I can just vouch for there is so much truth to this. Can you rewind the tape for us a little bit so that everyone has some context when we're talking about hitting rock bottom, when we're talking about you wrote a book and you had to start over and you had to rebuild your life? What actually happened? Take us back to that moment. Like, what is it that had you go to rock bottom?
So we'll go back to 2012. In 2012, I was an unbelievably successful account executive working for a major technology company. I was in sales. I dealt with all the world's largest financial firms. I dealt with all the world's largest hedge funds. I owned 4 homes. I had multiple cars. I was married to a beautiful, amazing woman. I ate at the finest restaurants in Manhattan and Greenwich, Connecticut. I was a VIP at many of them. I had what many would call was the life. But I completely lost touch with what really matters in this world. And my identity became so inextricably tied to my things that I would do anything, absolutely anything to preserve that. And I ended up committing fraud against one of the largest technology companies in the world. And I was arrested on October 1st, 2013 by the FBI, pled guilty to 1 count of mail fraud. I was sentenced to 2 years of federal prison. I was given 3 years of supervised release, which is probation in the federal system. And I lost everything. I lost the homes, I lost the cars. I lied to my wife and I told her that what I was doing was okay. And I broke the sacred foundation that is a marriage and a relationship, trust, and she left me. I was sitting in prison and I have nothing. And like I had said, my identity was so inextricably tied to my things. So here I am without anything. I'd hurt the woman that I loved. I was consumed with shame. And suicide became a very, very viable option. And I started planning how I was going to kill myself. A chance visit from my best friend of 30 years completely turned my life around and showed me that I had value outside of what I had always thought had given me value. It was just being a friend. So my rock bottom was just that losing everything, but wanting to end my own life. And then starting from that place and starting from having that nothing and having to try to figure it out.
Thank you for sharing so openly, because I know there's a lot there. And I know you share this in your book, but that's also, it's a heavy topic. And I know for a lot of people, it isn't easy to share. So I just thank you for sharing so openly with us, because
Absolutely.
I know, thank you. But like whether someone's watching now or they're watching on the replay, I think all of us in some level can relate to being at that place where you just feel like, whether you're in prison or not, where you're chasing maybe the wrong thing and you lose things that you think are so important, and sitting in that place where you're wondering, what the heck is this all for? How do I keep going? I'm wondering if you can almost take us back to like before, because I think it's obviously when you were in prison, that felt like the rock bottom, but that place beforehand, something you were talking there about just really chasing, it sounded like chasing things, those external things, and chasing what led you into kind of going down this path to begin with. Can you take us a little bit back to there, and that just the way you were thinking and the mindset, and really like, what was it there that you were craving so badly that started this catalyst that took you to rock bottom?
I didn't ever think that I was enough. I didn't think that I was worthy of my beautiful, amazing wife. I didn't think that I was worthy of my job. I was consistently number 1, 2, or 3 in the company in sales, always. And I'd be so scared. We'd have these national sales meetings or even just quarterly meetings. And I would sit there paranoid that I was going to get called out as an imposter. And it's just that empty feeling inside. So what I tried doing was, well, I can walk into a jewelry store and I can buy a $12,000 watch without blinking an eye. And it would work for a second. And the line I use in my TED Talk, it was, I was trying to fill a broken glass, and I was too blind to see that I never could. I didn't realize that what I was trying to fill I could never fill myself with what I was trying to fill it, but it becomes very addictive and it becomes very compelling to keep going down that road. And that's what my mindset was just that worthlessness and just not enough, and the imposter syndrome that those two things create.
Again, thank you for sharing it all here with us. I really appreciate that. And I think it's just such an important thing to speak to, because it's something I see with clients and in the entrepreneurial space so often. Sure, we're not in corporate and it's a slightly different environment, but I think there is such a tribe of people who feel not good enough or are stuck in imposter syndrome. I mean, raise your hand, anyone who's watching, if you've ever felt that way. And I think in the online space where there is so much hitting the 10K month, the 20K month, the 100K month, how easy it is to get stuck in this pattern of, I need to chase this thing to fill that void, the broken glass you were talking about. And I think we can just see through your story, when we're chasing those external metrics, they rarely fill, I think you were calling it the broken glass, but they rarely fill that glass. Does that feel like what you're talking about there a little bit? Do you see the parallel?
No, it absolutely. You nailed it completely. And there's another analogy that I use. It's running on a treadmill, trying to chase the horizon. You're never going to do it. It's never going to happen. I know for me, so it was, when I first started in my corporate career, the first goal, and I think many entrepreneurs, anybody in the corporate world, one of the first goals is the 100K. When I hit the 100K mark. So I was like, when I hit 100K, I'm going to be happy. I hit that 100K. Well, then I jumped to 200K. I said, well, now I want to hit 200. 200 then becomes $250,000. $250,000 becomes $500,000. And it becomes this process, and it's never enough. And I'd love to, when you said that everybody has experienced imposter syndrome in one way, shape, form, or another, I'd love to just use this analogy that really, when I was kind of going through imposter syndrome, when I discovered what I'm about to say, like it really opened up my mind to it. John Steinbeck is one of my favorite authors. I think Of Mice and Men is just one of the most brilliant books ever written. It's 137 pages, and it's stunning. He kept a diary while he was writing Grapes of Wrath. And it was a diary specifically about the book and the process of writing the book. And in that diary, and he said the diary was, I think he said it could only be published after he passed. And so it's out there and you can buy it. But in that diary, he wrote, "This book is becoming a misery to me because of my inadequacy."
Mm, mm,
That hit me so hard when I read that. But at this point, when John Steinbeck was writing Grapes of Wrath, he was already a successful and accomplished author. And here's this man trying to put this together. And it's become a misery to me because of my inadequacy. And that was like, everybody suffers from imposter syndrome at one point or another. It's just how prevalent it is.
I got goosebumps speaking of that. It's such a powerful example because I think it just speaks to this idea that we're talking about, where it's so easy to think the external metrics are what create success and what fill you up and what make you feel happy and joyful and successful. And we can see externally looking in, he's a successful author. He's already written successful books. We can look at you before you got arrested, externally looking in, you're successful. You have all the money, the house, the wife, all the things. And we see, I talk a lot about creating your version of success. Success is such an inside out process. And when it's not coming from there, it's so easy for it to crumble apart, which I think is kind of a beautiful segue to talk about. So we know where your head was at when you hit rock bottom. What was it? I know you said your friend came and talked to you, but when you were really at that place of rock bottom, what was it that started to shift the mindset when you're sitting in prison feeling this way?
So it's kind of interesting. It was before my friend's visit and before I hit rock bottom. I was sitting at a table outside in prison, and I was kind of journaling, and I started daydreaming. And it was as if I got hit with a direct download from the universe. It was the most clear, beautiful message of what's important in this world. And it's family and friends and connection and being of service, creating joy from the inside, freedom, creativity, gratitude, all these things, they poured into my body. And I was like, I get it. I was like, I completely get it. And, you know, I remember actually, and I'm not necessarily a religious guy, but it was such a direct thing from the sky. I looked up and I said, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm not going to fuck this up. But then I snapped out of it and I realized I'm still in prison. And I literally said, I was like, I was just given the secret to life and I'm not going to be around long enough to do anything about it. And it just was so sad. It was this brilliant thing. So to answer your question, after my friend's visit, I still had that download. And that was really such a huge impetus to me of really getting what's important in life. And that set like the first piece of that foundation in rebuilding was getting it and understanding that it's not the externals. It's not that constant chasing. That true joy comes from within. And that was what started it all.
I'm cheating a little bit because I've read your book and I know you. So I'm like trying to be mindful here, not to lead you with the questions, but it's so powerful. And I think it's for anyone watching. In some ways, I think this can sound cliche. These are the things we all know. These are the things we have heard. And I think there's something so powerful hearing it from you, where you really are in a place where you've been quite literally stripped of all of those things that we so often grasp onto and think are what we're chasing or what life's about. I think especially as entrepreneurs, it's so easy to get like wrapped up into that race. And it's just so interesting to hear from you. Here you are sitting in a place where it's all been stripped. And the things you're thinking about, the things that are the secret to life, nowhere there did I hear a watch or money or, and I mean, I'm all for money. I love making money, but I think there's a very big difference between making money in a way that gives you the freedom and the joy and the happiness and serves that versus making money for the sake of money to fill that external bucket of worth. And so I think it's just really fascinating and such a beautiful example. Here's my question. So I'm wondering, when you had that realization, do you feel like you started rebuilding while you were in prison and reinventing your life in prison? Or do you think that's something that happened when you were on the outside? It
did start in prison. I had no idea what the heck I was doing. I had no idea where to begin. I knew after my friend's visit and I realized that I had worth and I had value, I decided I had to give meaning to the suffering, not just my suffering, but really the suffering of my wife and my family. I was like, I can't let this be for naught. And this has to turn into something. And, you know, I just started, I threw myself into self-help. I was really lucky in the prison that we were at. We had 7,500 books. We had a great library. We had a wonderful library. My family was great. They sent me books. My mom, I don't know how she picked this book, but she sent me The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. And that was just such a game changer. My wife at the time, her cousin sent me Choose Yourself by James Altucher, which literally helped save me in prison. And it was just jumping in and, I mean, for lack of a better term, like throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks, because I had no idea what I was doing at the time. But it really did start in prison. It was messy as all hell. It was ugly, it was messy. It was lots of ups and downs, a lot of really difficult things. But I would say there were three definitive components that really started it for me. And that was journaling, expressing gratitude, and meditation. Those were three of the biggest steps that I took to, and what I call it now I can look back and I can have a little bit of a different perspective of it. Those help me clear the decks. Those help me work through all that muddy water to kind of get to a little more of a clear space. And they were just so incredibly important to me when I was in prison. It just really opened up such an avenue for me because, and we may or may not get to this, but like gratitude. When you can find, you know, I was sitting, so I'll tell a quick story. I'm in prison. Where I was on top of a mountain. We had the most beautiful sunrises and sunsets I think I've ever seen. It was unbelievable. And I got up and I got my morning coffee and I go to the library to do my stuff. It's like 5:45, 6 in the morning. And I walk outside and the sunrise is so unbelievably beautiful. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. And I stop and admire it for a little while and went into the library. It just was this natural thing for me to write. I'm grateful for this morning sunrise and I'm grateful that I was alive to see it. And that started my gratitude practice. But then, you know, looking back and even in prison, realizing everything's been stripped from me, don't know who I am, but I found something to be grateful for. And I think that just speaks to the power of that exercise.
Here's what I love, besides the fact that gratitude is so freaking powerful and all the brain geekery around that. But what I love about what you just shared, we see that it was messy. And I think there's this fallacy. I think it's almost easier when you're on the other side of something. I share a lot about my journey. Like, it was fucking messy in the middle of it. And I think it's easy on the other side to like just put it into some neat boxes of like, here are the things I did and ta-da. And I think it's just so refreshing to hear, yes, and it was messy. You did throw spaghetti at the wall, and that's normal. That's how we get out of the mess. It's not like there's a roadmap or a handbook to here's how you get out of rock bottom. And I just appreciate you for sharing that. And for anyone who's watching now, it's the same thing in business. And I think it's just helpful to remember that when you're feeling in that place. And the other thing I love, aside from the actual story, because that's just beautiful, it's simple. And I think that's something that is just so helpful to hear, that also translates to business. When, whether you're feeling rock bottom in business or in life, there's such a want to overcomplicate a process. There's such a want to think, okay, so the way I rebuild my life is this 45-step process with these really weird things. The practices you're talking about are beautifully simple and so powerful because of that. And I really appreciate that.
Well, you put up a story the other day that I love that completely resonated with me. Is you were talking about how, you know, if something is easy and simple, we don't buy it because we're like, no, it's not supposed to be that easy. It should be a little harder. I'm going to find the more complicated route to getting more clients, to getting more revenue, whatever it may be. No, it shouldn't be that easy. And we just get that hiccup. But some of the most, I think really some of the most beautiful components of life are simple. It doesn't mean they're easy to do.
1000%. Well, and I think that's the difference. It was probably, I mean, you'll speak to this, and then we've got some people saying hi, so we'll say hi to them. But I think you can probably speak to this. It probably was not easy to decide every day over and over again when you're sitting in prison, I'm going to practice gratitude, when I'm sure the brain just wants to go to, let me complain and bitch about where I'm at. I'm sure it was not easy every day to redecide, I'm going to go read that book. I want to hear more about the book you wrote, but start writing. But the actual act was simple. And I think that's that dichotomy that's so powerful to speak to. It might not have been easy in the moment, but the actual practice itself was simple. Does that feel like I'm getting what you're saying?
No, completely. You're nailing it 100%. It was really hard every single day to commit to these things. And it was trying to connect to that higher why of giving meaning to the suffering. It's not, I stuck with pretty much everything every single day. It doesn't mean that it went really well. I still have my old prison journals, and I was flipping through them the other day, and there was two things I was grateful for. One was my coffee tasted good, and I'm glad there's nobody in the library. That's all I had was that. And I just, I can actually remember those days of being really struggling to find something to be grateful for, really struggling to sit down for meditation, to journal, especially when I'm journaling about things where, in the beginning, talking about messy, journaling in the beginning was a self-flagellation exercise. It was me destroying myself over and over and over again. And, but I think I had to work through that to get through, to identify, I keep beating myself up with these same things. And I started seeing patterns. And, now I can realize, now I'm much easier with hindsight, but I knew there was something there. Now I realize that they were limiting beliefs, but at the time I still picked up on it. I was like, it's a theme. What does that theme mean? So I would explore it and go down. But yeah, messy as all hell, hard as hell. It's an ugly process.
And again, just thank you, because the norm is it's so easy. And what we really mean is it's so simple. The actual sit down, write gratitude. I'm grateful that there's no one in the library. That actual writing that is a very simple process. The act of sitting down and finding something to be grateful for when you're sitting in that place. And I'm saying this for everyone watching who can find the parallel in their life, where sitting your butt in the chair every day to do the practice of let me find something to be grateful for when it's COVID and the kids are at home and I'm stressed out, or business isn't going the way I want, or fill in the blank. That's the challenging part. That's why it feels hard, but the actual practice itself is really simple. And that's what I love about your approach and your transparency here. It just gives a lot of, I think, normalcy and just permission. We've got Kristen and says hi. Crystal says hi. Mary says heart. Tiffany says meditation and gratitude saved me too. I like team meditation, gratitude. I'll say I'm team gratitude and journaling over here. Mary says, oh my God, I felt the same way. I couldn't find things to be grateful for before. It was like I earned everything I got and blah, blah, blah. Crazy to think about now how hard it was. I think it's just awesome. So nice to see here for everyone. And this is like, we're taking a side tangent off the main topic here of your book and your success story, but this is a big piece of it. And I think it's just so helpful to speak to just this concept of gratitude, which I don't think there's anyone who hasn't heard of the concept of gratitude. It is so powerful. It's positive psychology, little darling. And hearing all of us say, and there are days where it can feel so challenging to practice this beautiful thing that we know will rewire your brain. And I just really appreciate that conversation.
I love it. And I would love to just add one thing to the gratitude practice for anybody who's doing it. And maybe you're already doing this, but the game changer for me, and this just came intrinsically. I'm grateful my coffee tastes good this morning. Why am I grateful my coffee tastes good this morning? And going down the why of things behind the gratitude completely opened up a whole new avenue and way of thinking. It's I'm grateful I'm alive. Why am I grateful I'm alive? Because I get to talk to my father and mother tonight. I get to, whatever it may be. And it just opens up so many different pathways and just leads to more gratitude. So that for me was just huge. That was a huge game changer.
Here's a question I have for you that I really wanted to save till the end, but it's perfect now. Looking back, and you can answer this, like there's whatever feels true for you. Looking back, are you grateful that you got arrested and went to prison?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hands down. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I would not exchange who I am, the work that I do, what I've accomplished. There's not enough money in the world for me to change anything. No, no way. No way at all. I embrace all of it.
Okay, so with your gratitude practice, why?
Because I have now, so we go back to the constant chasing and, hitting the 200K, hitting 250, hitting this, going for these things, chasing. I live now in such a state of stillness and peace and inner joy where I'm no longer chasing, and I wouldn't give up that state of being for anything. It is, honestly, let's think about it this way. You and I would have never met had I not done what I'd done, gotten arrested, and ended up doing what I did to be able to meet you. You alone, honestly, all of my friends, every single one of them is worth going to prison for. The relationships I have now, that alone, let alone everything else, is amazing to me.
Okay, so we can just drop the mic. We're just done. I feel like that just summarizes everything from rock bottom to success story. Like we're done.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
I think Libya, but I think I've said this before. I've had traumatic experiences in my past. I've had some rough shit I've gone through. And I always say, looking back, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, and I wouldn't trade it in for anything, because I wouldn't be here, wouldn't be the person I am if I hadn't gone through those times and the lessons there. And I think there's so much gratitude in that. And I think that's exactly to what you're speaking to. You wouldn't be the person you are. You wouldn't have what I consider, I think you're very successful, but I think you've really created it from the inside out to what really fills you up. And all of these things that sounds so cheesy, but the money can't buy, that we think we want money for, the freedom, the joy, that grounded peace you're speaking to, who knows if that would have happened anyway. So I think it's such a beautiful testament to that the things that we think are rock bottom, the things that we think are so difficult and challenging. And I think this is a perfect segue into your book, because I think this is where a lot of your book goes to. So often those are the things, when looking back, are shape us and mold us and allow us to be who we are and give us our greatest lessons.
Yeah, absolutely. What I say in my TED Talk, it was, our greatest adversities do not have to be the end. In fact, they can be our greatest beginnings and our greatest teachers. And they really are. And I think something so important too, while definitely segue into the book, but I just want to bring up something I think that is so critically important for anybody watching, listening, whatever. If you are going through the worst, or something really difficult, something really hard, life sucks right now, whatever it may be, it's temporary. And I think that's something that's so critically important, because when we're in the middle of it, it's so all-consuming. And it's so easy for me when I was in prison to think, I'm never not going to feel like this. I'm never not going to feel whole. I'm never going to feel worthy. I'm going to hate myself for the remainder of my life. I'm going to live a life of self-loathing forever. It felt permanent. And it's not. Nothing is permanent. Everything is temporary. And I just wanted to say that.
Now I'm going to piggyback off of that, because I think it's such a powerful statement. I think there's such a key to mindset, and the whole idea of doing mindset work, which I talk about so much, which I think can sound a little up and heady and not as grounded. And I think there's something to what you're speaking here, which is such a core component of mindset work, which is thoughts are fleeting. Thoughts are not permanent. Feelings are fleeting. Feelings are not permanent. So not only are circumstances not permanent and they will change, but our thoughts about a circumstance, our feelings about a circumstance, which is really where we have our life experience, those are not permanent. So not only can you choose to change them, this is, I don't know if anyone's read Letting Go by David Hawkins, but he talks a lot about this idea that if you sit with an emotion, most emotions have a shelf life of about 10 to 15 minutes if you truly sit in them. I'm sure I've talked with you about this before. Yep. And it's the same thing with thoughts you have, limiting thoughts or anxiety, or I'm so angry at the world for being in this situation, whatever that may be. If you really allow yourself to feel and sit in that, not only is it not temporary, but it's often so much more fleeting than we really think it will be. And I think there's so much power in knowing that and embracing that you're speaking to, that for everyone watching, I think it's just a helpful reminder. Circumstances are fleeting, but so are those thoughts and emotions if you allow them to. And so when we try to grasp onto them, that we stay stuck and loop in them.
Well, I think so. A couple of things in there. It's within, I think, the first 10 pages of The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. He just gives the two beautiful words: resist nothing. And it really is to, when those emotions come up, to let them consume you. And it hurts. It's not fun. But when we allow those emotions to completely consume us and run through us, that being the key part, that's where we look into that. When you're saying the 10, 15 minutes, that's really what happens. And then another example of that is the speaker and author Simon Sinek. He gives a great example in one of his talks of the antelope that is chased by the lion. You know, it runs, it's freaking out and everything like that. And you watch, you know, these National Geographic things, when it gets away, it goes back to grazing. It's not sitting there talking to its friends going, did you see that lion? That lion almost got me. And then 2 days later going, do you remember when that lion almost caught me? You know, it's just a different, you know, obviously they have different wiring than we do, but I think it's just a testament to when something goes up, you know, when those emotions stay, and, you know, 3 days later after the event has occurred, I'm getting angry at something that happened. Well, I'm the one who brought that up. I'm the one still holding on to that. The situation and circumstance, like you said, that's been done for 3 days. I'm the one doing that.
It's my thought about the circumstance. And can I geek out? I'm like totally going to take us off topic.
I love when you geek out.
But we're going to geek out for a little bit here. Well, first, to what Craig was saying, really this idea of letting the emotion go through you versus when we try to push or stop it, that's when it stays stuck. You have to think about through goes out. When we just let an emotion, we're trying to stop it, that's when it gets stuck. And that's when we keep looping through it. But the example you gave about the lion from Simon Sinek, they've done a lot of research for us as humans. We are animals. Things like anxiety or anger, these heightened emotions that are more in that fight or flight. The reason we get so stuck in them is we don't have a way to close that loop. So when we were back in hunter-gatherer days, if we had been scared or terrified or angry, we would chase something, we'd kill it, and then that would end and close the loop of that emotion. For us as humans, we don't always allow that close of the loop, which is why simply feeling something or having literally a physical exertion, I'm doing this as like an example, but if you're feeling anxiety or anger, can help tell the body, I am now closing this loop of this emotion, to help let that emotion go through you instead of staying in that kind of arousal state, which is why a lion isn't turning around saying, hey, did you see what happened 3 days ago? Because they've actually closed the loop with that energy exertion. I'm taking us so off topic, but
I love it.
It's like, I can't help talking about this.
I love on our calls when you're like, do you mind if I geek out? I was like,
can we just geek out for a moment?
I was like, always.
All right, Shaukya says, I'm going to reread Of Mice and Men. Thank you for this inspiring conversation. Mary says, I love that why aspect of it. Yes, the why aspect of the gratitude. I think I've not been paying attention to those comments. Yes, the why aspect of gratitude, so powerful. I'm so grateful to you for sharing that with us. All right, I do want to make sure we talk about some of the book stuff, because I think that ties in so beautifully to the whole topic you were talking about, from really going to rock bottom to this success story. And I think as everyone's hearing here, your success story, that true success, because you had external success before. You wrote a book, which in and of itself is a success. But tell us a little bit about when you started writing the book, part of that process behind it. I'd love to hear a little bit about that and what the book is about, because I think there's some powerful things we can dive into there.
The book was started in prison, and I started writing because I had to. I needed an outlet. I needed somewhere to go to, and beyond journaling. It was back to that giving meaning to the suffering. I had always, secretly wanted to write a book. I always thought about writing a movie script. Well, now I'm in prison. For those of you who don't know, there's plenty of time in prison. So here I've got plenty of time. and I need to give meaning to the suffering. Always wanted to write a book. Now's my opportunity. And I had to do it. And I just would go to the library and I would write furiously. And I remember I wrote the beginning of the book, the very first draft of the book, I wrote 187 pages in 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah, it just came out of me. It was pure shit. But I was so thrilled to get it out and to have that foundation. Writing it, this circles back really nicely to what we were talking about. If things are messy, things are really, really messy. So when I'm writing the book, it's no different. It was messy. I'm sitting in the prison library. I'm writing the book, and I was writing about, if I remember correctly, I was writing about getting arrested. So this was only 10 months earlier, or at this point, a year. Not that matters, but it's recent. It's still fresh, and I'm in prison as a consequence of getting arrested. And I threw the pen down. I was like, why am I doing this? This is why I'm in prison. Why am I torturing myself by doing this? This is ridiculous. It's impossible to get a book published. I'm a nobody of an author. I'm not a writer. I've never written anything, book before in my life. And a voice just chimed in from my heart. And I flipped the page in my journal because I wrote everything by hand. There's no computers. And I flipped the journal and I wrote down the answer. And it was to help one person. And it was so crystal clear, and it was so simple, and it was so beautiful. I flipped back and I continued to write, and the pain wasn't that bad. That was all through the first draft. The second draft of the book was, at this point, I was in the Brooklyn halfway house. And Brooklyn halfway house was a really horrible environment. It was an absolutely atrocious environment to be in. Still didn't have access to a computer. So I wrote the second draft of my book on my phone. I wrote 100,000 words on my phone in Evernote, which was just a complete disaster and a mess unto itself. And I'm going to go through the process of writing, but I just want to circle back, as you asked, what the title is and what's about. And this was one of the chapters that really was also a pivotal moment in my life and in writing the book. The title of it is The Blank Canvas. And how I came to that was when I was leaving prison, my mentor, Ed was 6 years into a 12-year sentence. He still had another, 4 years to go. But he knew that I was leaving, and he asked me, he said, "How you feeling about leaving?" And I said, "Ed, I have no job. My wife is divorcing me. I have no money. I have no place to live. Who's going to hire a felon? Who's ever going to date a felon? I'm never going to find love again." And I was really, I didn't say this to Ed because out of respect for the fact that I know he wanted to be home and I was going to be leaving. But in my mind, I was thinking, prison sucks, but it's 3 square meals a day and it's a roof over my head. And I was thinking that, and Ed put his arm around me. And also in prison, you don't touch each other. So this was a really special moment that he actually did that. To have that physical touch from him was really important. Put his arm around me and said, "Craig, you have a blank canvas. You can paint whatever picture you want." And that was just such a pivotal changing moment for me. And that really, in that second draft of really getting that story out, really, really helped guide, drafts 3, 4, and 5, which I wrote on my 2011 iPad that I had to get back from my now ex-wife. And I used a software called Scrivener that I had no idea how to use. I couldn't afford the stand to prop the iPad up to make it a nicer keyboard. So I found a book that was like a nice height. And then I had to keep something to keep it from sliding. So I had this awful looking thing on my desk, and I would just, bang away. And that was several 100,000 words written on that. Then I finally got my laptop, and then I went into drafts 6, 7, and 8. And I do all that because this was a 5-year process. It was 8 drafts. And I literally just finished last year. And I'm at the point now where I am ready to self-publish.
I want to pause because there's so much here that's just gold. Like you just gave us like a big pot of gold. Like we got to the end of the rainbow here. And I just want to reflect a few things for everyone listening. I think first, how many drafts?
8 drafts.
8 drafts. And I say that because I work with the most amazing clients, and a lot of times I share their wins and their celebrations. And I think what people don't always realize is what goes in behind those celebrations. You have a book, you're about to publish it. We're going to talk about your Kickstarter. We're going to talk about all these amazing things. And it's so easy to see that and forget. And there were 8 drafts. And before that 8 drafts, you got arrested. And like in that time, you had to rebuild your life and your mindset to then sit down and write this book. And I think it's just very important for whoever's sitting there ready to write page 1 on draft 1, or go out to put Instagram post 1 to book client number 1, or to write line 1 on their website. Everyone starts somewhere. And most people aren't starting at the top. They're starting, it sounds so, such stupid rap songs, started at the bottom, now we're here, keeps coming to mind. But I think it's just this helpful reminder. 8 drafts, that's what got you here, and all of the things that go into that draft. And the other piece that I think is just so nice for everyone to hear, you hit what you call rock bottom. You did rebuild, and then it still felt scary to go out into this new life. It wasn't like, and then poof, unicorns flew out your ass and like life felt magical. It still felt scary. And it took someone else telling you you've got this blank canvas to really have that perspective. And I'm saying this for you, tell me if this feels true or not, but I'm sure it was still not easy. We were talking about the ease and simplicity, and I'm sure it still felt daunting. And there was still trepidation and fear because you're human with this beautiful blank canvas. And I think that's a really important thing to remember for everyone who's starting their blank canvas with their business or their creative projects. So I just word vomited a lot, but I'm curious to hear if that lands and if that feels true for you.
It was scary the whole way through. It was absolutely scary the whole way through. It was, like I said, it was messy and it was ugly. It was scary. Life was going on. Obviously, while I'm writing this, life is still going on. And to give an idea of the messiness, was just a quick story. I remember, I get out of prison, and I'm fortunate I got a job, but I get a job at a gym making $12 an hour working at the front desk. I'm a couple million in debt, making $12 an hour. I have no money. I actually, this one night, I have $3 on me. MetroCard in New York City to get to work is $2.75. I didn't have any food. So I actually had to sit there and think, the guy at the deli who sells me the breaded chicken cutlet, just in a piece of tinfoil, no bread, no anything. He sells it to me. There's only one guy. The other guy, like, he screws up, he makes a mistake. He sells it to me for $1.50. $2.75 and $1.50. I only have 3. I'm like, I'm just not going to eat tonight. Okay, I'm just not going to eat, but I'm still writing my book, and I'm still doing these things that bring me joy.
I want everyone to hear this. And this is not a live stream to not eat or to burn yourself out or any of that nonsense. So I know that's what you're saying. I just like disclaimer, but I want everyone to hear this because I say this with so much love, but I hear it all the time in terms of it's so hard, or I want to give up, or all the excuses and stories. The human brain wants to hand everyone for creating the things they want. And I think this is just such a beautiful example. You had every reason not to do any of this. There's no reason you need to write a book. I mean, you wanted to, but no one's making you write a book. No one's making you do any of this. You didn't need to fucking do any of this. Like, you didn't even need to rebuild your life. Here's what I'm curious about. And I have to bring it back to mindset, but what's your mindset in that moment when you've got $3 and these are the choices you're making? And I still have to write this book. What's the mindset that's driving that?
We're going to go down an interesting path, I think, right now. I was so utterly consumed by shame to the point that I planned on killing myself and figuring out how I'm going to do that with my limited supplies in prison. I obviously didn't, and I don't want to say I worked through it. That shame stayed with me for so long and just was still consuming. I knew that if I didn't do something about that shame, if I didn't tackle it head on, it was gonna own me for the remainder of my life. And it would still be shame, but it would transform. You said I didn't have to rebuild. I could have stayed, I use the analogy, I burnt everything to the ground. I could have stayed in those burnt ashes. And I could have stayed consumed by shame and just turned into, I think, probably a bitter old man filled with a ton of regrets. I knew that I could not let this story own me. And I knew that an avenue to working through shame is by shining a light on it. And by writing my story and by getting it out there, that I was going to be able to, not only was it cathartic for me, but I knew, or I hoped, when I was writing it, I really hoped that what I wrote in that, prison to help that one person. I was like, if I do this, if I do this well, and I really am honest, and I'm deep and I'm vulnerable, I have a chance of helping that one person. And that is the dismantling of shame. And that was where so much of that fuel and that mindset came from, was I can't be owned by this. I can't allow my story to own me. I have to own my story.
Does it feel fair to say, just kind of connecting the dots here, that the vulnerability of sharing your story and being willing to sit in that vulnerability and that discomfort, that within that, and that was the release for the shame and where some of that freedom I think you talked so much about came from? Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. It's, you and I we talk a lot about it, but it really is, when we're vulnerable, we give others permission to be vulnerable. And it just creates this beautiful, beautiful cycle. And it's, shame lives and breathes in the dark. It's like a fungus, and it's just going to grow. And shame tells us that we're alone, and it loves the idea of us being alone. So it can just compound on itself. The moment that we're vulnerable, something that's what I find super interesting, with my story and sharing it more and more, is not too many people have gone to prison. Everybody has felt shame. So our paths to the emotion are completely different, but the emotion itself is such a universal thing. And that's where we connect. And that's really, to shine a light on that, to get that shame out of the dark and realize that, oh, wow, my journey is so much different than yours, but what shame feels like. And you now are being open with me. I'm not alone. You're not alone. And it's like, whoa, what just happened? And that's where that freedom comes in. Because really, shame is a prison cell and vulnerability is the key. And it's but it's finding that fortitude and that strength to be vulnerable in the first place.
Yeah, I have questions about that, because I think and we were talking about this before, but there's everyone who's in this group, I'm sure, has heard your message is in your mess. I think it's something that people talk a lot about, like finding your message in your work, like look at your mess, look at your struggle, that's where your message is. And I think it's true. And I think everything to what you're speaking about, it's like, yes, that's true. And then to have the strength and the fortitude to share that message, to be vulnerable, is a completely different thing than getting clearer on what that message is. I find oftentimes, like, you can come up with the story and the message, but it's a whole another can of worms to share it. And I'm curious, because we're talking about the strength and fortitude, but was there a time there for you? Was it always just like, I have to share this, I'm going to be vulnerable, I can do this? Or was there a time where you had to do some work to feel okay to share, to be vulnerable, to be safe sharing some of your story? I think it'll be helpful for people, whatever their story is. I think this is something a lot of people in this group could relate with.
I love that question, because you nailed it. I just couldn't jump head first into it. I'll rewind real quick. When I first made the choice to commit the crime, it was a fraud. It was using my laptop. So when I hit the enter button, when I hit the mouse button, my voice inside told me not to. It told me this was not the right thing to do. And I ignored it. My fraud continued for about 10 months. I probably made thousands of choices to continue and perpetuate the fraud. And every single time my heart spoke and said, this is not the way. I ignored it all of those times. Eventually, when I was at that rock bottom, that voice left me. It was completely gone. And it's one of the most horrific, empty feelings in the world. So when I start rebuilding, I don't have that voice. And I had to learn how to trust myself. I knew I didn't want my story to own me. I knew that vulnerability was a way to not allow the story to own me. But how can I get there if I don't trust myself? And that was building that inner trust, was that opening the door to being vulnerable. And then I'm sure you're going to ask, so I'm going to get right to how did I build that trust?
Only, I mean, that's a big question. So only if you want to share, but I think it's self-trust is the core for any entrepreneur. I believe it's so essential to success. So I think if you have any light you want to shed on the self-trust and that rebuilding piece, I think it'd be really valuable for the group.
I absolutely would. And it's, my friend put up a tweet of all things that I happened to catch. And it was, the surest path to self-confidence I know is making and keeping commitments to yourself. And it just resonated with how powerful that was. It was just like, that's it, because he was talking about confidence, but I knew inside, I said, I can't have confidence if I don't trust myself. And I said, trust is still the first piece. So trust is a component of that confidence. I have to build to that. And that means I have to make and keep commitments to myself. So my first one that I did, when I realized that I had made fear-based decisions that landed me in prison, when I started rebuilding, I realized that I had to conquer my fears. I had to write my fears down and conquer them, because fear landed me in prison. I said, well, fear is now going to help me rebuild. My number one fear was so easy to identify. It's public speaking. So I made a commitment to conquering my fear of public speaking. And I also committed to getting on the biggest stage that I could think of, which was a TEDx stage. That was 5 years ago in prison. I read this tweet. I realized that I hadn't done anything about conquering that fear. I'd been out of prison. I was living in the halfway house. Hadn't done anything. And I said, now's the time. So I found a Toastmasters group and meeting that met at a time that I could go to, and I committed to going to it. I committed, if I had no idea what a Toastmasters meeting was like, if they asked for volunteers, I'm going to commit to volunteering to speak. So walking in that door, so hard. They asked for volunteers. My hand shot up. And I remember looking at my hand, I was like, who the hell did that? Why did I do that? I went up, I spoke for 26 seconds, and I got a round of applause, and I sat back down. And this may sound so silly, but I faced my biggest fear and I didn't die. And I made and kept a commitment to myself. And that just showed me the power of doing that. And then it just became, what else can I commit to? What else can I commit to? What am I going to keep? What promises am I going to keep to myself? That's how I built the trust to get to that point of being vulnerable.
I love that. And I want to reflect a few things for everyone listening, because I think it's helpful to hear some things you can take away from that. I think this whole idea of commitment and that showing up for what you say you will and how that builds self-trust, completely transferable to business. It's something I say all the time with content. Content builds trust with your audience, but it builds trust with yourself every time you show up when you say you will. And I think it's that self-trust you're talking about. And the other thing here, I hear from you that was so much of the kinds of commitments you took. I have a question about fear I want to ask. I'm making a mental note here. But I really hear you showing up and making a commitment to take the action that's contrary to what feels safe or what you want to do, to what your brain is kind of handing you, which isn't not listening to that voice, but I'm scared of public speaking. What's that contrary action? I'm going to commit to speaking. And I think that right there, not that we could like put a formula on it, but that's the piece there. It's like whatever anyone here is scared of, if you're scared to show up in a live stream, if you're scared to have a sales call, what is that contrary action you can commit to? Because that's the action that's going to, when you have that commitment, that's going to build that self-trust. And I think that's something that maybe even without knowing, that you really brilliantly have demonstrated, as you're saying and sharing all of your story here, that I think has been a big piece of us having this conversation about your book. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. And it also, it resonates with me with what work you and I have done of I become the guy who does X. And that's just so important. It becomes this, I'm a guy who does that.
Yes.
And it just is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think that's just so important with the work that you and I've done. I'm so grateful for that, honestly.
I'm giving you credit here, and don't give it to me. I'm giving you, this is about you, and this feels really important, and I want everyone to hear this. I'm the guy that does this. I talk a lot about mindset. So first you have to have the mindset, but you didn't just sit and journal and write gratitude, which I am all for. And these are beautiful practices. Then you went and you were the guy that does. You were the guy that becomes. You were the guy who shows up again and again and again. You didn't go to Toastmasters once. I mean, how many times have you been to Toastmasters?
I've been a member now for 4 years. I ended up as the president of the Brooklyn Premier Club and actually gave my TED Talk this year.
You didn't write one draft. You wrote how many drafts?
8 drafts.
Like we could go on and on here. Like,
yeah.
You do the mindset work and then you do the doing to become the person you are and to step into that next level of yourself. And I think that's just I want to reflect that for everyone, because I think it's also very easy again just to see book that's getting published, coaching business, all of these shiny things, and to see, yes, but here's what was behind the scenes. You did the mindset work, you took the action to become that person.
I think what I feel like you're speaking to, which is so important, is the myth of the overnight success. And just, it's so easy to see somebody be like, oh my God, they created $1 billion unicorn startup company, came out of nowhere. Do a little background search and find out that they started 4 other companies that failed miserably. The guy was living in his car or whatever it may be. It's the myth of the overnight success. It's peeling the layers of the onion to see really what was behind everything, and that it's not pretty, and that it's hard. And I could take us down a whole different path, but I don't want to screw you up. But I mean, it's also the non-attachment.
Oh gosh, we could have a whole thing there. I do have a question though, just to piggyback on the topic here. Do you feel like you ended up in prison overnight?
No, not at all. That was years. That honestly was years of things building up to get to that point. That was, let alone I can even map out how I committed the fraud that I committed. That idea doesn't come overnight. This was a complex thing that I did. It had a tremendous amount of moving pieces. So even just planning that alone was, my guess, 10 to 12 months.
So of course, rebuilding your life from rock bottom, if it took however long to get there, is not going to happen overnight. And I think it's just helpful. Like, I just love that example. And thank you for just being so honest about that, because there is a myth of the overnight success. We don't have that myth of the overnight rock bottom. You know what I mean? I think it's just helpful to see. It's like, there is no overnight. Everything is just this series of simple actions taken over and over again that compound to a result, whether it's rock bottom or success. And I think that's what you're sharing so beautifully. I want to hear about because you brought up the detachment and that piece. And then I do want to make sure we get to speak a little bit to your book and your Kickstarter. I'm just going to see if we have any comments. We've got I made it from someone. You guys, the comments are a little funny the way they're coming in. So if anyone has any questions or anything that I missed, feel free to retype it. Or if you have any questions for Craig, and then I want to hear a little bit, we're going to go off topic a little bit and talk about detachment, because I love that topic. And then we're going to close. I want to make sure everyone who's listening, Craig has a Kickstarter for self-publishing his book, and I want to make sure we chat about that a little bit too. But let's bring it back to what we were talking about before. Where was your brain going? You said you could take us down a rabbit hole. I want to hear a little bit about that.
Well, I think, so we'll use the TED as an example. Was the conquering of my biggest fear and the ultimate stage to do that. What I realized in the process, and this was also, because you and I worked on this, and this was such a joint thing. And it was, the TED stage was so amazing. It was so incredible. It was conquering that fear. But what I realized from that, and I've done this with a lot of other things, writing the book, the Kickstarter will be a perfect example as well. It's who I had to become in order to A, get on the TED stage, to deliver the talk that I delivered, to have it, you know, it hit 100,000 views this week. Just came out in April and just crossed 100,000, which I'm so psyched about. So thank you everybody who has watched it. I appreciate it, but it's who I had to become. And the non-attachment in that is if that hadn't happened, let's say, you know, the event got canceled or something like that, I still did all the work. I still did all of that work to get to that point. That's mine for the rest of my life. The actual, the goal that we have of, you know, let's use, you know, some of the work that we do. Let's also use like a 10K month as a, you know, wonderful, wonderful target. As long as we're also going after that from the right place and not trying to fill something. But, you know, let's say you've set a goal to hit that 10K month and you bust your ass to get to that 10K month. And maybe you don't get that 10K when you're hoping that you do, but all the work that you did to get there, that's yours. That's yours for the remainder of your life. You became the person who strove for that and did all that work. The 10K month, the TED Talk, those are all just icing on the cake. That's what I mean, that's non-attachment to me, is the goal is merely icing on the cake. It's who I had to transform into and become to get it is what really matters.
I'm mindful because otherwise we're gonna have a 4-hour conversation on this topic because it's absolutely one of my favorites. But I think something that you're sharing here about this idea that is so kind of beautifully full circle, you were sharing at the beginning about where your mind was at that really led you to ending up in prison. And there was so much attachment there around the money and the things and the external. And I think what you're speaking to here, this detachment, it's, yes, you still want the beautiful, shiny things, but it's really about the process of becoming that is the actual goal. And like you said, those are icing on the cake. And that is complete opposite from, I think, where you were, and just such beautiful evidence of the reinvention, the work you do with people and that reinvention of someone who really was about how do I hit that goal to how do I, yes, want that goal, detach from it because it's about the process of becoming. And that's actually the win, which also makes it so much easier. It's just, I think it's just such a beautiful full circle. I'm gonna pivot us because otherwise we're gonna go down a 45-minute rabbit hole here. You have a beautiful goal that you have set for yourself. You have done a lot to become the type of person who has a book that is ready to be published. You have a Kickstarter. Tell us a little bit about this goal you have detachment around and a little bit about where you're at with the book, because I think that would be really great for everyone to hear.
So after 5 years, 8 drafts, book is ready to be published. I decided to go down the self-publishing road to professionally self-publish it. You know, I could very easily just throw it up on Kindle as it is right now and be done with it. That's not what I want this book to be. I want it to reach as many people as possible. I wanted to find that person who feels right now how I used to feel. And that's really important to me, to do it the correct way. So doing that it's not cheap. So I decided to go the Kickstarter route, the crowdfunding route. Launched my campaign today. Today is my first day of my campaign. And this is so funny, I am $29 away from my day one goal of hitting 33% of my total amount. So I'm thrilled.
What's your total amount? What's the date? Because I think it's really nice for everyone to hear. I think it's just inspiring and also just helpful to see, like you set a goal, you're reaching it from this place of detachment. I think there's just so many layers here.
So the overall goal for the total campaign is $14,000. It is a 25-day goal, 25-day campaign, meaning it will end on September 4th. And my day one goal of that 33% is $4,000. So right now I'm at $39.71. So I'm thrilled about that. And it's to go to that non-attachment, detachment thing that we're talking about without going down a 45-minute rabbit hole, because you and I both could do that very quickly.
4-hour rabbit hole.
Who are we both kidding? It would be 4 hours. It's not 45 minutes. We would scratch the surface in those first 45 minutes. The process of making the decision to go this route, to knowing that I'm going to get the book out there. And that's actually, this is something really important, knowing that the book is going to get out there. I would love for this Kickstarter to be a massive, massive success. But if it's not, everything I had to do to create this launch, to learn all these new tools, to reach out to people, can I circle it back to real quick without going down a giant rabbit hole? When you and I first started working together a year ago, I don't know if you remember, one of the things that I had such a difficult time doing, that we had to work through the mindset of, was asking for help. I now have a Kickstarter campaign out where I'm asking for $14,000. That's worlds apart from asking. By the way, when I mentioned asking for help, it was asking a friend for help because I didn't want to be a burden. So, I mean, talk about like a mindset shift, and we go down that, for forever. But if I don't hit my goal, that's okay. Everything that came before that, back to what I was saying, that's all mine. And the fact is, my book's still going to get published. That goal will still get met. That's the overarching goal, is the book is going to get out there. It's just a question of how is it going to get out there? And that's where that detachment comes from.
Can I ask you a challenging question live?
Do it, yes.
Do you believe, from a place of detachment, do you believe you'll reach your goal?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want everyone who's watching to just let that sink in, because I think there's something really powerful. And I know I can say this, I think it's okay for me to share. I know the amount of work that's gone into being in a place where you can say that so confidently. This is detachment. This is like when we talk about manifesting detachment, you fully believe you're going to reach that goal. And you're also 100,000% okay if you don't, because it's about the process of becoming and all of those goals. And because no matter what, if this doesn't work, you're still publishing the book and you'll find another avenue. There is so much in that. Like, if everyone listening could just borrow an ounce of that you can translate into your business, like that, like right there, there's no secret to success. Like, there's so much there that is such a key to success, and why this live stream is from, they call it from rock bottom to success story, because that's that piece right there. That's the mindset. And I think it's just a beautiful thing for people to hear. So thank you for sharing that. Thanks for letting me ask.
Absolutely. Yes.
Because if you had said no, I don't know what I would have said. But I'm confident enough in you to know how you feel about that.
That was almost a challenging question for you.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, did you hear me stumble over it? I was like, oh, how's this gonna go? No, I have full confidence in you and your mindset behind it. I have a question I want to piggyback to, but before that, while we're talking about the Kickstarter, we can drop some links below. But if people in the group here want to help you reach that $29 today to hit the 4K and your $14,000 goal, tell people next steps, and we'll make sure we drop some links.
The easiest way, just to verbalize it, actually, because the link for the Kickstarter campaign is so long and lengthy that I don't even know what it is.
I'll drop it in the comments though. It'll be in the comments.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then also you can go to my Instagram, Craig_Stanland, and I have a link directly in my profile, in my bio. Goes right to the page.
So I'll make sure when we're off live, I will drop a link to the Kickstarter if you want to drop a link to your Instagram as well. That way, if people want to follow you and your awesome work. And then I'm going to go back to my question, but what can people expect as we're going through the Kickstarter launch? Because I think if people are going to follow you on Instagram, what can they expect with the book?
So it's going to be, day one. We're going to hit that 33% mark.
We're hitting that.
We're hitting that, no doubt. We're hitting that. And, it's going to be for these next 24 days, really, I guess it's about, at this time, about 24 days left. It's just going to be showing up every single day and still keeping the pedal to the floor, I think, which is so important in so much of what we do, is just keeping that pedal to the floor, while simultaneously, and you told me this the other day, and it's critically important, giving myself permission to do things outside of chasing and pursuing this goal, and to relax and to enjoy myself, to go to the beach, to do those to do those things and have that CEO time and that time to myself. So it's simultaneously pedal to the metal while taking a break and being compassionate with myself, because this is a marathon. So during that marathon, it's just going to be showing up. I'm going to be sharing stories on Instagram where I'm going to break down chapters of the book. I'm going to be sharing chapters that didn't make the book.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah, there's stuff. So this is, I know I might be going off point here. The other day I found something from one of those old, like second draft. And I put it up saying, hey, this didn't make the book. And then I asked a question of people and I was like, this is actually going in the book. So to be a ninth draft, it was like it was so good. And I'm not patting myself on the back. It was
Pat yourself on the back.
It was very cutting. It was actually, so real quick, it was, when am I going to stop reaching for her hand? You know, that's what the chapter was about. When am I going to stop looking for her hand to hold? And I think it just really, you know, speaks to such an important part of my journey. So it's funny, I did that. So that's part of the process. What it's going to be. It's going to be lots of updates, because I want to make sure I communicate with all my backers and everybody who's interested, and just following, you know, kind of bringing people on that journey of what this is, and you know, like going down that road to that 14,000, and just, you know, hopefully having some fun doing it.
So everyone watching, I invite you to, we'll make sure we drop links, follow Craig, show him support if you're able to, show him monetary support and be a backer if you're not able to. Show him support as a fellow creative and entrepreneur. I think we are all in this together in various ways. There's more than one way to share support. So I'd love to invite everyone in the group to show your support, please. Craig, thank you for being here. May I close with 2 quick questions that I think will be nice for everyone.
Absolutely.
And then follow Craig's journey along on Instagram. You mentioned, there's just so much you've mentioned here about rebuilding, reinventing, going from rock bottom to creating success. And you mentioned a little while ago this idea of you've conquered fear, you've conquered your fear. And a question I have that I think would be lovely for everyone to hear. You've conquered fear. Do you still have fear? Oh,
I kind of had a feeling you were going to go there, and I'm so happy that you did, because do you want to know what my biggest fear right now is? Publishing. That is my biggest fear right now, is to this thing that I'm so proud of, that I really did put my heart and soul into. You know, Hemingway said there's nothing to writing. It's just cutting yourself open and bleeding on the page. And I would cut deeper and deeper with every draft. And I'm scared to put it out there. That's a fear, to publish it and put it out in the world. That's my new #1 fear right now.
Thank you for, I won't give away your tools that you've created, but for shining a light on the fear and sharing it with us. I think it's really powerful. And I think it's really helpful for everyone to see that you're demonstrating exactly what we talked about. Yes, you've conquered fear. You still have fear because you're human. You're a human having a human experience. I would call BS if you didn't say you had a fear, with love. And I think you're demonstrating exactly that contrary action in the face of fear that you've been showing through this whole live stream. That's your fear. And what are you doing? You're throwing everything at getting this book published.
Yeah, it's, you know, there's so many different ways to say it. The same guy who put out that tweet that motivated me to make and keep commitments is the author Kamal Ravikant. And he has written, and it's said a million different ways, but I love the way he says it. If something scares me, there's magic on the other side.
Co-sign.
Yep.
Yep.
You know, I think it's just so amazing.
I thank you. Okay. Last question. Otherwise, I'll just not give you your evening. You won't get to eat dinner when you are able to eat meals now. If I'm thinking how to phrase this, you have so much wisdom. You've poured this into a book. You do beautiful work with your clients. I think you have so much you could give the world. So this is a very big question. So this does not need to be a perfectly wrapped up in a bow answer, but just right now in this present moment with what's on your heart, if there is that one person watching, if there's someone watching, what would you love someone to hear?
I love this question. I actually have the answer, because it is so deep inside me and so intrinsic to me. Your past cannot define you without your consent.
Mm. Will you repeat that one more time, please, for the people in the back?
Absolutely, it'd be my pleasure. Your past cannot define you without your consent.
All right. And on that note, I will not take us down a rabbit hole. I think that's a beautiful, powerful ending. Please take that in, everyone, because there's so much wisdom in that. Craig, thank you so much for hanging out, sharing with us for like an hour and a half. And besties and bosses, thank you for hanging with us. We didn't get to see all the comments. So if you're watching now in the replay, feel free to leave more. You can tag me or Craig. I'll make sure I pop back in with those links. Thank you all for being here. You're fucking amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.
And let's see how this Kickstarter goes. Let's get to 4,000 today.
Awesome.
Bye, y'all.
Awesome. See ya.
Let's see. Now I have to figure out, everyone's going to have to hang out with me for a second because I figure out how to get off of Zoom.